Only those who want to submit during the debate should write their names down.
Provisions of Articles 90 and 155(4) of our Constitution, Section 9 to 91 to 98 of the Public Finance Management Act 2015 as amended, and Rule 145 of the Rules of Procedure of Parliament. Committees are mandated to consider, discuss, and review the budget framework paper, and through the Budget Committee, present a report to the House for approval by 1st February of each financial year. So there's a legal bind here. In compliance with the above provisions, I beg to present a report of the Budget Committee on the National Budget Framework paper for the fiscal year 2025-2026 for consideration and approval by this House as required by Section 9(8) of the Public Finance Management Act 2015 and Rule 145(3) of our Rules of Procedure. Right Honorable Speaker, this report is structured in two major parts. Colleagues, Part 1 is on the generic aspects as the requirements or compliance with the requirements of the law, the legal compliance, the economic and budget performance highlights, the budget strategy as presented by government to the committee, the medium-term outlook, and the indicative resource allocations for 25-26. That is Part 1. Now, in Part 1, we also make some observations with respect to this budget, the indicative planning figures, and make proposals to government. Part 2, this time round, Right Honorable Speaker and colleagues, this time round, based on the guidance of the Speaker, we have decided to put Part 2 as recommendations from the committee as they came. Although the committee also gives guidance on the emphasis, where the members and the country gave emphasis, and I will talk to that aspect later on. The methodology adopted by the committee involves examination of relevant documents.
Honorable, you want to read everything.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the whole day.
So, methodology is there. The documents that we referred to, which I want to lay here, and the minutes, 2015. It is required that the minister shall, for each financial year, prepare a budget framework paper which shall be consistent with the National Development Plan and with the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility. The budget framework paper shall be in the format prescribed. And colleagues, I go to page 7, submission of the budget framework paper to Parliament. The National Budget Framework paper for this year was submitted to Parliament and laid on the 19th December 2024, accompanied by the Certificate of Gender and Equity Responsiveness, Certificate of Climate Change Responsiveness. The committee observes that the National Budget Framework paper was presented to Parliament in line with Section 95, 96A and 96B of the PFMA 2015 and Section 30B of the National Climate Change Act. In compliance with Section 3 of the Public Finance Management Act 2015, an assessment by the committee indicates that NBPF largely conforms to the requirements of Schedule 3 under the Public Finance Management Act 2015. However, the following information was not provided, and this is an ongoing process, and I hope at a ministerial policy statement we shall receive this detail. 1, alternate fiscal framework on the fiscal risks as required by the law. 2, the flow of government investments in the financial year as required by the law. 3, the rate of employment and unemployment in our country as required by the law. These 3 were not submitted. So the committee observed that the above information has not been provided to the Parliament even in the previous National Budget Framework papers. The committee recommends that the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development reports on all the requirements as per Schedule 3 of the Public Finance Management Act. Consistency with the National Development Plan 4. There is a mistake here. See in this draft. Oh, it's not there. Consistency of this plan with the National Development Plan 4. Right, Honorable Speaker and members, The goal of this plan is to achieve higher household incomes, full monetization of the economy, and employment for sustainable socio-economic transformation. This goal will be achieved under the theme Sustainable Industrialization for Inclusive Growth, Employment, and Wealth Creation. To achieve this goal, the government has set out 5 objectives in the NDP4, and these include sustainably increase production, productivity, and value addition in agriculture, minerals, oil and gas, tourism, ICT, and financial services. 2, enhance human capital development along the entire life cycle. 3, support the private sector to drive growth and create jobs. 4, to build and maintain strategic sustainable infrastructure in transport, housing, energy, water industry, and ICT. And 5, to strengthen good governance, security, and the role of the state in development. 2.5, consistent with the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility. Mr. Speaker and all members, the second Charter for Fiscal Responsibility was approved by Parliament on the 27th of January 2022. The purpose of this charter is to provide government's fiscal policy objectives in the next 5 years that will ensure sustainable delivery of the country's goal of a socio-economic transformation. The CFR 2021-22 to 25-26 has the following objectives, fiscal objectives. 1, total public debt. That total public debt in nominal terms is reduced to below 50% of GDP by the financial year 25-26. 2, one of the goals was that total domestic debt interest payments to total revenues, excluding grants, is reduced to 12.5%. 3, that nominal publicly guaranteed debt to GDP is maintained at below 5%. Number 4, that the government may borrow from the Bank of Uganda only in accordance with Section 36(5)(a) and (b) of the Public Finance Management Act 2015 as amended, and Section 33 of the Bank of Uganda Act as amended. Number 5, the overall fiscal balance, including grants, should gradually adjust to a deficit not exceeding 3% of the non-oil GDP by financial year 25-26. 6, the ratio of non-oil revenue to GDP shall grow by at least 0.5 percentage points on an annual basis. And 7, the growth rate in recurrent spending as a percentage of GDP shall not exceed the growth rate of revenue as a percentage of GDP. And 8, a maximum of oil revenue worth 0.8 of the proceeds of the preceding year's estimated non-oil GDP outturn shall be transferred to the consolidated fund. Now, colleagues, our assessment is in table of the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility targets against National Budget Framework are in the table below. You can see the growth rate in recurrent spending as a percentage of GDP is less than the growth rate in revenue, which is a positive thing, which is very good. The ratio of non-oil, the overall fiscal balance, including grants onto oil, is a little off the point. It should be minus 3.0, but not so bad. In nominal, the nominal debt stock to GDP is okay. So largely, Mr. Speaker, the committee made this observation. The budgetary framework is not generally compliant to two areas. That is total domestic debt interest payments to total revenues, excluding grants, and the overall fiscal balance is including grants to non-oil GDP, as indicated the table above. But out of 80 points, 2 did not meet 2 of those. So the budget framework does not provide the nominal debt projections for financial year 25-26, restricting the committee's assessment of the compliance of the budget framework to the certificate of financial of the CFR in relation to public debt as a part of GDP in the medium term. So the committee recommends that the budget for the short and medium term fully complies with CFR requirements, and any deviation must be guided by Section 7 of the Public Finance Management Act. Now, 2.6, consistent with the National Development Plan 4. And Mr. Speaker, this was the major point of contention discussion. Right, Honorable Speaker, your framework paper is consistent with the National Development Plan. The committee assessed the consistency of the NBPF for 25-26 to the National Development Plan 4 and made the following observations. 1. The strategic direction and priorities of the budgetary framework paper are consistent with the NDP4. That's the conclusion. The program budget allocations, however, of the BFP are significantly lower than those proposed in the NDP4, and we have given the table of those details. This could imply that the planned interventions as per NDP4 may not be fully executed in the first year and hence undermine the achievements of the overall NDP4 objectives and the tenfold growth strategy. Honorable Speaker, NDP4 says they need 92 trillion to implement this plan this coming financial year. But the national budget paper gives 57 trillion. That was where the variance is. And that's that point. Number 2, the budget paper budget prioritization for most programs are consistent with the NDP4, and we give the table also. Number 3, the targets set in the budget framework paper are inconsistent with the targets in the NDP4, and this could hinder effective monitoring, the implementation of NDP4, and the annual budgets. And the committee recommendations that 1, enhance revenue mobilization efforts to effectively implement the NDP4 interventions. 2, the performance targets of the budget framework paper and NDP4 should be harmonized, calibrated in order to arrive at realistic targets. The details of the budget framework paper of NDP4 versus the budget framework paper are in table 2. For example, in the NDP4 agro-industrialization, NDP4 had planned an estimate of 2.448 trillion, which is 3.6% of the overall budget of NDP4. But in the budget framework paper, the figure there is 1.689 trillion. This coming financial year, which is 2.9. So that's what we are talking about. The details are there. Gender and equity compliance, Mr. Speaker and honourable members, in fulfillment of the requirements of Section 95 to 6A of the Budget Framework Plan, the National Budget Framework Paper was generally compliant with the equity and the gender requirements. And the details are in table 3. Page 14. The programs, the agro-industrialization and sustainable urbanization and housing performance performed at 40 and 20% respectively, which is below average compared to previous years. In some instances, the Equal Opportunities Commission noted that the late submission of budget framework papers by MDAs to the Economic Commission affected timely assessment and production of assessment reports. The committee observation. There has been remarkable improvement since the last financial years. However, two programs did not satisfy the requirements. 2, no specific measures to equalize opportunities for men, women, persons with disabilities, and marginalized groups were provided alongside the gender certificate as presented to Parliament. Number 3, some MDAs did not possess adequate capacity to disaggregate data so that the assessment could be done. Committee recommendations. The committee recommends as follows. The required program budget framework papers on time should be subjected to some form of sanctions as provided for in Section 78 of the Public Finance Management Act 2015. B, Equal Opportunities Commission is supported more to undertake periodic national gender and equity gap mapping surveys rather than doing it at the end of the financial year. C, more capacity building should be undertaken at all MDAs, especially with regard to the gender disaggregated data, the data compilation, gender budgeting and assessment, and developing gender and equity performance indicators, among others. 2.8 on climate change. The observations are there, and the table is there, and the thing. Generally, the certificate shows that only 6 programs on the assessment scored above 50%. These include natural resources, environment, and others. The contingencies fund, the observations are there, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. The committee recommends that the Ministry of Finance always adheres to the law and replenishes the contingencies fund with required amounts. Parliament should follow up this matter to the logical conclusion during appropriation, because failure to adhere to this provision has been a major cause of supplementary budgets and supplementary requests that distort the approved budgets during budget implementation and execution. Right Honourable Speaker and colleagues, economic and budget performance highlights. Economic performance. Right Honourable Speaker and members, during the financial year 2022-24, Uganda's year-on-year real annual GDP was recorded at 6.1%. So the
Procedure, Honourable Samba.
Thank you very much, Right Honourable Speaker. On his report, the committee report, Mr. Speaker, deals with the legalities and expectations of the law. We are at the early stages of the budgeting process at budget framework paper. Mr. Speaker, if at this level we don't mind the matters of law at this level, Mr. Speaker, then we are planning to ignore the law as usual. Would it be procedurally right, Mr. Speaker? We deal with these matters of the law. At least the minister answers that particular point. Why are we every year? Why are we not respecting the law? Then we proceed after getting explanations at that level. Then we are able to go into the others having respected the law. Thank you very much, Brother Rose.
Thank you. Honourable colleague, the responses will be given. We shall get good guidance. When we start breaking in between, we shall be grading ourselves. So this is a big report, and we have enough time, the good thing, okay? The whole day we're on this report to debate thoroughly. That's why I insisted we must give it enough time. I don't want to limit you. So let's receive the report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. 3.1 Economic Performance. Right Honourable Speaker and honourable members, during the financial year 2023-24, Uganda's year-on-year real annual GDP was recorded at 6.1%, up from 5.3% registered in the financial year 2022-2023. In nominal terms, the economy expanded by 140.19 billion shillings in 2022-23 to 153,040 billion shillings in the financial year 2023-24. The growth was largely attributed to services and industry sector, with the services sector growing at 6.8% compared to 5.9% growth in the previous financial year. And industry sector, which grew at 4.9% from the 4.0% registered the previous financial year, largely driven by manufacturing and construction activities. The agricultural, forestry, and fishing activities grew by 5.4% in 2023-24 compared to 4.5% in the previous financial year. In the current financial year, colleagues, the GDP for the first quarter grew by 6.7% compared to the growth of 5.6% registered in quarter one of the previous financial year. This on account of the 8.7% growth of the agricultural sector, 5.9% growth of industry, and 5.6% growth of the service sector. the committee observations, Mr. Speaker. The registered real GDP growth rate of 6.1% in the financial year 2023-24 was higher than the projected growth rate of 6.0%. So we achieved much better. Number two, structural transformation of the economy driven by industrialization is not being fully realized as would have expected, but the contribution of the industrial sector to total GDP has fundamentally changed, averaging 26% from 2020-21 to 2022-23. This is so despite government injection of funds in UDB, in other financial institutions as part of the because of COVID's effect. Three, despite the observed improvement in GDP growth, growth is still considerably non-inclusive, as income inequality, as measured by the Gini coefficient, has remained rather high and unchanged. So our committee recommends that with the focus that Uganda's GDP to expand by 27 trillion being inked on the tenfold economic growth areas, it is important that this realism is checked by adequate resource allocation to match the agro-industrialization, tourism, manufacturing, those Artemis areas. So this intention can only be achieved with more resources to the Artemis areas. It's also important that for government to clarify on when exactly the commercial production of oil and gas is expected to commence, because it's a factor in the calculation of the tenfold growth and projections. Inflation, right, Honorable Speaker and members, the committee observations. Headline inflation and core inflation outturns of 3.2% and 3.0% respectively are in range of the projected headline inflation and core inflation of rates of 3.4 and 3.0 respectively. So we are comfortable there. Two, core inflation outturn of 3.0% is considerably lower than the policy target of 5%, and this is really commendable. We thank the managers of the fiscal space. Private sector credit. Mr. Speaker and colleagues, the growth in private sector credit has slowed down. The average growth in credit in the private sector was 7.7% in the financial year 2023-24, and it has come down from 9.9% in the financial year 22-23. This slowdown was primarily due to a decrease in the shilling-dominated lending, which grew by 9.6%, down from 12.1% in the previous fiscal year. Similarly, the average annual growth in foreign currency denominated loans declined to 3.2% from 4.7% in the previous year. Currently, other depository corporations' private sector credit growth has softened, reflecting the impact of increased government borrowing, probably crowding out the private sector, which constrained private sector access to credit. Committee observations. The slowdown in private sector credit could suggest difficulty in looming economic uncertainties. It could also suggest that high lending rates, partly as a result of government's increased borrowing from the domestic sector, has led to high costs of doing business and has constrained the private sector to borrow from the same space. On external sector, Mr. Speaker and colleagues, Uganda's recorded overall balance of payments position deficit of US dollars 1,154.4 million is a deterioration from that of a US dollars 50.4 million recorded in 2022-23. The deterioration was really attributed to the 8.2% expansion in the current account deficit to US dollars 4,174.7 million due to the deterioration in all its sub-accounts except the mechanized trade account. Foreign direct investment. FDI inflows in financial year 22-24 reached a record high of US dollars 3,034.11 million from coming up from $2,950.6 million recorded in financial year 22-23. FDI inflows have increased steadily year on year, largely reflecting the ongoing activity in the oil and gas sector, and a positive business outlook for our country. International reserves. As at the end of June 2024, the stock of international reserves stood at $3,230.03 million. The reserve cover in future months of imports, excluding oil projected imports, was equivalent to 3 months. This is much lower than the 3.8 months of import cover recorded at the same time in the previous year. Committee observations. A sustained balance of payment deficit could spell economic challenges and vulnerabilities over the medium term if access to external financing isn't restrained amidst low foreign exchange reserves. It is therefore paramount that the effective implementation of export promotion and import substitution strategies is prioritized over the medium term as a more sustainable way of building foreign reserves. The committee recommends that export promotion is prioritized and agencies such as Uganda Export Promotion Board, our diplomatic missions, and other related bodies are financed sufficiently in this budget in order to promote exports, in order to improve the balance of payment situation in the country, promote economic growth and employment. And this can only be achieved through strategies and interventions such as focusing on a few export sectors that can be coordinated effectively using the capacity and resources available to ensure successful implementation of the export strategy. 2, promote and spur development of the entire value chains for the proprietary export products. C, strengthen the institutions charged with quality surveillance and monitoring, including with relation to manufacture, importation, distribution of agricultural and industrial products. Invest in public infrastructure necessary for quality assurance along the entire value chain for selected priority products. E, encourage through provision of appropriate incentives the private sector to invest in infrastructure necessary for quality assurance along the entire value chains for the selected priority products. Mr. Speaker, on public debt and colleagues, Uganda's public debt remains sustainable over the medium and long term. The ratio of public debt to GDP was 4.8% in financial year 2023-24. This is below the limit of the Charter for Fiscal Responsibility of 52.4%, and this is great. Committee observations. Though the debt levels are remained stable and at 46.9% in financial year 2023-24, up from 47.1% in 22-23, the domestic debt rose to 20.1% as a percentage of GDP in financial year 2022-23, up from 18.7% in financial year 2022-23. This is a growth of 17.6% of domestic debt, and I think that's the challenge. The sudden rapid growth in GDP, when debt over the last year was a bit worrying. We therefore recommend that government should gradually scale down on domestic borrowing because it's becoming unsustainable and is also negatively affecting private sector credit growth in the country and increasing the number of non-performing loans indirectly. 3.8, the revenue performance. During the financial year 2022-23, Uganda shillings 28,820.87 billion was realized in gross revenue and grants against a target of 32,751.2 billion, implying a performance of 88.0%. This implies that the overall deficit was registered at Uganda shillings 7,197.2 billion, equivalent to 3% of GDP, 3.5% of GDP. Expenditure performance. Total expenditure and net lending performed at 95.9%. Recurrent and development expenditure performed at 106.7% and 79.5% respectively. The committee observations. Effective implementation of the domestic revenue mobilization strategy does not seem to yield its desired objectives, as revenue to GDP still lingers in 13% to total GDP. And this range has been persistent for the last 3 years. So we might need to do some form of re-engineering there. 2, Tax revenues as a percent of GDP are still very low and still below 13%, suggesting low tax collection efforts by URA, in addition to generous tax incentives and exemptions despite a low tax base, and this might be eroding the potential tax revenue that could be used to widen the fiscal space. 3.83 aggregate expenditure performance. At aggregate level, Uganda shillings 33,957.64 billion was released under both government and external finance funding during the financial year 23-24. This equates to 101% of the approved budget. Aggregate absorption was, however, 93.9%, which represents strong budget execution as at the end of the financial year. In regard to the government of Uganda budget of Uganda shillings 28,183.951 billion, which was released by the end of June 2024. This equates to 112.6% of the approved budget. Aggregate absorption was at 99.3%. So government of Uganda releases were way above the approved budget on account of supplementary expenditure, schedule number 1, which amounted to Uganda shillings 3.5 trillion shillings. Of this, 1.8 trillion was the current one, 1.5 was development. The details are on the table. Wage expenditure on wage, total wage releases performed at 7,434.5 billion. We performed on wage at 102%. Which represents an absorption rate of 98.4%. Non-wage expenditure of the release was 13,928.8 billion, which equates 109.7% of the approved budget, and an absorption of 100%. All this is explained because of the supplementary budget, which gave this over 100% performance in certain sectors. Development expenditure, total development releases were performed at 12,377.34 billion, 86% of the approved budget, and of this, 10,457.87 billion was spent, and which represents an absorption of 84%. Committee observations. We quote from some of the reports on Uganda from the World Bank. According to the World Bank, poor planning, the routine use of supplementary budgeting, even for wages and salaries, and weakness in overall public financial management have led to overspending, fiscal slippages, and a sustained accumulation of domestic arrears. In the financial year 23-24, supplementary expenditures were financed partly by internal budget cuts, which hinder the budget and makes it difficult to achieve fiscal objectives. Supplementary spending continues to undermine the credibility of annual planning and budgeting, especially considering that activities for which these expenditures are made, which are foreseeable actually. In addition, supplementary budgeting heightens macroeconomic risks. The committee recommends that government should limit supplementary spending to only unavoidable expenditures as the rest of these other expenditures tend to distort the budget and have continued to distort the budget. Mr. Speaker, that's a very strong performance at program level. Colleagues and honorable members, I led you to read financial performance by activities shown there on the table 6. Let's go to budget strategy, the budget strategy that we are going to implement. Page 27. Budget strategy for financial year 2025-26. Right, Honorable Speaker, financial year 2025-2026 National Budget Framework Paper is the first implementation of the NDP 4. The goal of NDP 4 is higher household incomes, full monetization of the economy, and employment for sustainable socio-economic transformation. The goal will be pursued under the theme of sustainable industrialization for inclusive growth, employment, and wealth creation. To concretize the gains so far achieved during the 4th National Development Plan, NDP 3, in NDP 4, and in order to propel the economy of Uganda to higher levels of socio-economic transformation towards double digits, the theme for this coming financial year's budget will be maintained as full monetization of Uganda's economy through commercial agriculture, industrialization, expanding and broadening services, digital transformation, and market access. That's our theme for this coming financial year. The overall objective of 25-26 budget strategy is to strengthen economic growth drivers that underpin the restoration of the economy back to the medium-term growth path and directly contribute to the expansion of GDP tenfold from the current $53 billion to $500 billion by 2040, and double it to $100 billion by financial year 2029-2030. The budget strategy for next financial year is therefore based on the principles of tenfold growth strategy. The gains, the lessons learned, and the opportunities from NDP 3 as well as NDP 4 new strategic direction. This demonstrates continuity of the socio-economic agenda and transformation strategy. This strategy underscores employment creation, wealth creation, higher household income by prioritizing the key enablers for accelerated growth. Colleagues and other members, these are the 4.1 priority areas for the budget strategy. This year's budget strategy outlines 4 major key areas. One is agro-industrialization, with a focus on fully commercializing and formalizing farming as well as undertaking strategic value addition for export. Number 2 is tourism development, with a focus on increasing tourism arrivals by 5-fold under the current spend per tourist and length of stay strategy. Number 3, mineral-based industrial development, including oil and gas, with a focus on undertaking quantification of mapped mineral deposits and their governance regime and delivering of fast oil in this financial year. Number 5, science, technology, and innovation, with a focus on fast-tracking commercialization of ongoing innovations in the pathogen control and management for vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics. The committee observed that the proposed budget framework paper allocations for financial year 25-26 to the above strategy, ATMIS, agro-industrialization, tourism, mineral-based economy, science, and technology, these anchor sectors are inconsistent with the above highlighted strategy. The allocations to all 4 ATMIS anchor sectors or their equivalents are projected to decline compared to the previous budget. In line with the above strategy, the allocation to this anchor program should have increased instead, but now here they are declining. Therefore, government should repurpose the resources in the national budget paper and improve allocative efficiency to refocus the resources on the above prioritized sectors of the economy, because they are not prioritized. In addition, government should strengthen the implementation financings of the domestic revenue mobilization strategy and diversify public finance options by implementing the public investment financing strategy in this, including concessional and commercial loans, Islamic finance, climate finance, and others. The resource envelope. Right Honorable Speaker and colleagues, honorable members, the preliminary resource envelope proposed by the Ministry of Finance for financial year 2025-26 is projected at Uganda shillings 57.4 trillion. This reflects a reduction of 20% from Uganda shillings 72 trillion this financial year. Decline in total resource will be on account of reductions in 1, Petroleum Fund, 2, budget support, 3, net domestic borrowing, 4, Bank of Uganda repayment, and 5, domestic refinancing rollover. This is where the reductions have happened. It's a positive state, very good. So committee details are on the table there. We expect, if you look at domestic revenues, this financial year we expect to collect about 32 trillion. Next financial year we are expected to collect about 34 trillion. So the rest of the details you can see there. The Bank of Uganda repayment, we paid 9.1 trillion this year. We don't have any other debt with Bank of Uganda in the coming financial years. Interest payments, we have paid 9.6 trillion this year. We will continue to pay another 9.6 trillion, or 9.2 trillion, less by 361 billion. So those are you can read the table and see. Committee observations. Next financial year, the projected allocation for domestic areas is only Uganda shillings 200 billion. This falls short of the verified domestic areas by Auditor General, which according to the Auditor General's report were over 14.606 trillion. In 2024, of which Uganda shillings 8.312 trillion are reimbursement to Bank of Uganda, leaving 5.748 trillion for unpaid invoices, pension and gratuity. The committee was informed that Bank of Uganda areas are being cleared fully in the current financial year 24-25. The committee observes that some of these areas are generated as a result of Ministry of Finance failure to release resources for construction obligations that are partially paid, but so certificates remain pending, leading to accumulation of areas. So the accounting officers are not entirely to blame. The existence of areas is an indication that the financial system has gaps which allow commitments or obligations to be made without having sufficient funds set aside to honor those payments. This negatively impacts on the credibility of the budget. Colleagues, if a cow commits and is given the past payment and in the second quarter is not given the money, those are how areas come. He has already decided to get the goods. Good fiscal management and budget planning should prevent areas from being created. Therefore, governments should allocate additional resources to clear areas in the budget for financial year 25-26. This trend in domestic areas ought to be managed strategically to reduce the risk of increased government debt and crowding out the private sector. The committee recommends that government provides Ugandan shillings 1.15 trillion during financial year 2025-26 and in the subsequent years until 2029-30. This will clear the outstanding bill of domestic areas of Ugandans of 5.7 trillion in 5 years, if we paid 1.1 trillion. If we can pay back of Uganda 8.9 trillion, let's pay these other ones also 1.15 trillion per year. The committee recommends that to avoid further accumulation of areas, unpaid certificates should take the first call on budget releases by vote. The indicative program allocations for financial year 2024-25, in order to reduce the silo approach to implementation of government programs, and Mr. Speaker, as you guided us, we have put these things in programs. All the votes, we have put them together in programs. The financial priority has been given to the Human Capital Development Program in NDP4, Governance and Security, and the Integrated Transport Infrastructure and Service Program, which will be taking a significant amount of the national budget, as shown in Table 8. Colleagues, on Table 8, you can see program allocations. Development planning implementation will take the biggest amount, which is 38.5%, and that's where we have payment to debt. The next one is human capital development, which will take the biggest chunk of 17.4%. The next one is governance security at 13.1%. The fourth one is integrated transport infrastructure at 11.1%, and the rest follow in that releases. How you can see agro-industrialization is going to take 2.9%, but we are saying this is our key growth sector. We need more money there. Committee observations. According to Section 9.3 of the Public Finance Management Act 2015, the budget framework paper shall be consistent with the NDP4. The table above provides comparisons of NDP4 budget allocations by program against proposed allocations per the budget framework paper 25-26. Out of the planned total public costing of 67.7 trillion for program interventions under NDP4, only 85% or shillings 57.41 trillion will be availed for implementation of government priorities next financial year, according to the BFP for 25-26. This indicates a shortfall of about 10.3 trillion Uganda shillings compared to the NDP4 projections. In addition, variations are evident in program allocations as provided in the table above. With the exception of digital transformation, sustainable balancing and housing, regional balanced development, and integrated transport infrastructure and services programs, all the other program allocations are way below those projections suggested by NDP4. And we think this must also be examined by the ministry and government. We therefore recommend that the second budget cycle and the subsequent completion of the budget estimates should take into consideration the ATMIs, the priority spending areas identified and approved by Parliament in the National Development Plan 4, so that we can be moving together as a country. Priorities and the indicative budget performance 25-26. The fundamentals of the economy are there. I want to go briefly. Agro-industrialization is key. Tourism development is key. The proposals are there. Mineral-based industrial development, including oil and gas, is there. They are outlined. The oil and gas details are there. Science and technology, those are the activities that government intends, what the kind of things government intends to do in those areas. That will inform the allocation of resources, the ATMIs. Committee observations. Committee recommends that the following priorities should be included as part of the budget framework paper. On agro-industrialization, Mr. Speaker, it is important to increase access to appropriate agricultural mechanization and farm power tools. Because to grow and increase production, there must be mechanization. Number two, we must look at the extension system in the country, especially specialized trainings, equip people, facilitate extension workers. Number three, establish and operationalize appropriate post-harvest handling. Number four, increase market access by establishing and maintaining appropriate market infrastructure, like developing and integrating the national COVID traceability models, the geospatial COVID registry, and especially funding to the Uganda National Bureau of Standards, which is actually the one which verifies our standards, does the testing, does the certification. If we don't fund and improve standards of products in this country, our agro-industrialization is going to be constrained. Someone can say it will be a challenge. Tourism, the outline is there of recommendations of the committee. On tax policy, Mr. Speaker, the committee observes that over the years, the domestic revenue mobilization efforts are being hindered by the lack of a national tax policy that would form the basis for tax legislation and administration. The committee was informed that the Cabinet Memorandum on a draft national tax policy was submitted to Cabinet for consideration. Our recommendation is that the national tax policy is expedited in order to inform the tax bills and proposals for the coming financial year 25-26. Colleagues, on part two, Mr. Speaker, I think at this point I need to lay down the minutes discussions to part two. We have decided at this point, at this policy stage level, like in the previous time, not to restrict or to start crossing the propositions and suggestions from the committees. So we have decided to leave the recommendations of different committees in their entirety and make them an annex, the proposal of the committees, to government. So it is up to government so that we don't constrain and stop the committee from making suggestions to government at this point. So we have lifted all the recommendations of different committees and attached them as an annex. So it is up to government to consider them. But in the discussion, yes?
Honorable Chair, can you formally lay?
I beg to lay key observations. I will go and read them according to how the committees came to the budget committee. During the deliberations of the sector committees, the Committee on Budget made the following key observations. Observations on the East African Community Affairs. The key concern there was that the budget did not cater for statutory obligations as reported for the East African Community contribution of 22 billion. So we are likely to be locked out of the East African community from talking and speaking because we don't have money for this coming financial year to give to the East African community. Number B, Committee on Education and Sports. The committee highlighted the following priority areas and suggestions to government. One, the issue of the new secondary school curriculum and A-level curriculum was a big concern, and the committee recommends that resources be put in the new curriculum for our children. B, the staffing for universities. Our universities are performing at below 23% in terms of manpower. Government should look into the staffing for universities. C, on the infrastructure gaps for the most of the young universities, where in some universities they are constrained despite the growing numbers, they are lacking infrastructure. So government should focus on the staffing and infrastructure of universities. Number D, the biggest discussion and concern for the country and members of the different committees was there was need for resources to grant aid and rehabilitate many more primary schools across the country, especially where they are not, and especially the old schools. Number 5 on education. Colleagues, the enrollment and retention rate in our country, enrollment is stood at 70%. And because of that stagnation and the high school dropout, many children who drop out get married, so it increases high teenage pregnancy, it increases neonatal mortality, and it affects the health sectors. So the solution to the problems in health are actually in education. So the committee recommends that free and compulsory universal primary education be provided by government. And the committee recommends an amount of 390 billion. The details are in the report. Members are also concerned, the committee was concerned about the low investment in education and research, yet every country's development is hinged on the capital of its human resource. So the development funds for universities are not commensurate. The committee observed that the development funds for universities are not commensurate with the non-tax revenue they collect. This impacts on the services offered to the students who are the source of the non-tax revenue. The committee observed that there were no funds in the budget for financial year 25-26 to cater for the National Curriculum Development Center to implement the lower secondary school curriculum, as well as a transition to A-level curriculum. More so, given the fact that the first cohort of students under the new lower secondary school curriculum are due to join A-level in February 2025. And the funding gap in all this area was reported to the Committee on Education as being 12 billion. The committee was further concerned that the proposed abridged curriculum for A-level that is being developed in hurry is bound to be inadequate because of lack of resources. Number 5, concerned that the budget did not cater for the conversion of the primary tiers colleges that were closed and earmarked conversion to other institutions. Number 6, there was also concern about the fate of Busoga and Bunyoro universities. They were informed that the two universities do not have votes, but are under vote 13, Minister of Education and Sports. The committee undertook to convene a meeting with the members of parliament from Bunyoro and Busoga, the Committee on Education, to discuss, because the government said that they don't have, there are challenges pertaining to, especially to Bunyoro, where it is said they don't have land. On the Committee of Foreign Affairs, the biggest concern was that government has not prioritized subscription to international organizations. As a result, and on many occasions, Uganda has accumulated a lot of areas to these organizations, to the extent that Uganda's delegations to meetings often risk embarrassment or being denied opportunity to participate or talk at these meetings. And we know the recent incidences with this respect. Number 2, the members are also concerned about the criteria for determining missions to receive funding for commercial diplomacy monies and the benefits that accrue from the missions in economic terms. Number 3 is that government of Uganda should pursue also the issues of concerns of our embassies. Our embassy in Nairobi was burnt, whether it was adequate or not. Embassy, our house in Nairobi, and there were discussions. We were told there were discussions going to compensate. Now we have got another problem again. On tourism, trade, and industry, the major issues here was the committee was once government established Uganda's. The concern here was what is happening to Uganda's shareholdings in all projects that are funded under Uganda Development Corporation. What is the size of our equities, and why are we not getting dividends from these companies? It was also observed that apart from Housing Finance Bank, which paid 14.5 billion this year, all the state-owned enterprise and other entities where government has a stake have never paid us any dividends or declared them to us. It was observed that if this entity, the UDC, was supported, it could bring a positive change to our economy. There was concern about the chronic funding of Uganda National Bureau of Standards, and yet it is supported and is projected to generate over 100 billion in a year. Number 3, we recommend that government should prioritize the re-establishment of the cooperative bank. Yes, quotas there. The Committee on Public Service and Local Government, a major highlights to the government. The criteria for allocating PDM does not put into consideration the poor regions, populations, and other factors. There is need to re-examine this criteria in order to increase allocation to poor regions in the spirit of equity. We recommend that all districts affected by creation of new cities should be given 1 billion to build new headquarters. On presidential affairs, major issues, the committee was concerned about the criteria for selecting presidential pledges for implementation and asked for the list of pledges that will be fulfilled in this financial year. We are still waiting for that list to guide us in discussing the next budget. The committee noted that the government programs on skilling youth by His Excellency the President is a very good program, but most of the beneficiaries are too poor to acquire the necessary tools to practice the acquired skills after training. They recommend that government needs to develop a mechanism of providing beneficiaries of the program with the tools to help them utilize the skills acquired. Number 3, the committee requested for the return on investment on projects under the Science, Technology and Innovation Secretariat. For example, the history of vaccines. What has happened to our vaccines? We invested a lot of money. And what is happening to the whole sector? The committee was concerned about the lack of funds for Kitesi landfill under KCCA. The committee observed that it's important for government to revive NUSA 4 project, as well as Dr. Dib for Northern Uganda. On Committee of Gender, Labor and Social Development, the major concerns here, and that's where the focus of the country should be, the committee was observed that it's important to have labor attaches to Ugandan foreign missions. The committee was, however, informed that some Ugandan missions abroad have labor attaches, but they are not facilitated. It was also observed that in the last budget, the committee was concerned that in the last budget, the president brought under the addendum, the president gave 34 billion to cultural leaders, and they were paid 60 million per month. But in the current budget, their emoluments have been reduced to 5 million per month, and the committee is concerned about this move. The committee recommends that this anomaly be corrected and rectified so that our cultural leaders get what they already started getting. The committee was concerned that the funds proposed to be allocated to the Ministry of Gender for election of special interest groups could be duplicated in funds allocated to the Electoral Commission. Mr. Speaker, I think the government needs to look at the resources that are going to go to the coming elections. Ministry of Gender wants it, police wants it, everybody wants it. I think they need to have a strategy on who really should get the money and how that resource must be managed and how much it should be. There was also a concern on exodus of Ugandan girls to work abroad, and this should really be looked into and the ramifications therein. So, Speaker, on the committee of ICT, the concerns were there were the new vision, they were really the new vision, though operating as a business, was not paying dividends again. The committee reiterated its previous recommendation that NITAU should be charged with digitalization of all government institutions instead of spreading expensive digital units in different government institutions. Last year, Mr. Speaker, we recommended that there must be really synergies in government e-services, and that NITAU should be the overall thing to kind of handle this sector. The committee was informed that other government institutions were resistant to centralization of digital services. The committee asked the budget committee asked the committee to submit a list of entities that are resisting to be centralized and to work under NITAU, because this will create efficiency and avoid duplication. You saw the story of fight between the Bureau of Statistics, Electoral Commission on the tablets, which were the specifications. The committee was informed that NITAU license does not allow provision of services to the private sector. Mr. Speaker and colleagues, we have rolled out the national backbone infrastructure, and it's a very good infrastructure. But NITAU does not have a license to give those services so that the private sector can actually pay for those services. And I think we need to open up this space and generate revenue. The committee was concerned about Posta Uganda that did not meet statutory obligations like payment of NSSF and PAYE, and yet was paying wages. Committee on Finance, Planning and Economic Development. The committee was concerned that government-owned business entities have not been declaring dividends. This was a running issue. 2, the committee asked the government commitments on the days when Uganda will start benefiting from oil revenue. 3, the committee concerned the different government bodies have different unit costs for procuring the same item. The committee called upon PPDA to come up with a national price list for common items. Mr. Speaker, we are told that for the last 5 years, PPDA has not come up with a national price list. You find now we are getting in the budget and work plans. Parliament budgets for a bottle of mineral water at 2,000 shillings. Another ministry at 6,000. Another one at 10,000. Another one at 12,000. So we are pricing the same item into different prices. I was just saying thank you. Corruption. If we don't have a national price list, we will be pricing corruption. If it's 2 million, the same water here costs 2,000 here, and next MDA is 6,000, another one 10,000. This is not new to Uganda. We had the story of Bank of Uganda buying pens at 385,000. So the national price list should come. The committee was concerned that government continues to pay commitment fees on loans that are not being utilized. You see, last year in the Auditor General report says that we paid about 73 billion on commitment fees alone, when we need that money to pay other things. On legal and parliamentary affairs, the committee was concerned that whereas the judiciary is currently conducting sessions in different regions, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution is not facilitated to be present in all the court sessions. The committee called on for joint planning for the 2 entities because none of them can work without the other. Facilitating one is not value for money. The committee also noted that the judiciary and DPP run different digital e-systems, yet their products are linked. The committee proposes that digitalization of the 2 entities should be centralized to save money. Number 3, the committee was concerned about the high failure rates at LDC. Number 5, the committee noted that the Human Rights Commission was advocating for a salary enhancement and yet it is due for merging with the Equal Opportunities Commission, where their salary will be enhanced based on the salary of Equal Opportunities Commission. The committee recommends that the Human Rights Commission should await for the implementation of the mergers of the RAPEX. Committee on Physical Infrastructure. The committee was concerned that government was planning to compensate individuals who knowingly encroach on land belonging to Uganda Railways Corporation. There is a request of 550 billion to compensate people from Tororo Railway. Now we were concerned, this is an old railway. And I'm told the government has a different opinion. The committee was concerned that there is a selective granting of contracts to former employees of UNRWA. They said that others are already working, others are not working. Number 3, the committee noted that government was looking at Uganda Airlines purely as an infrastructure development, yet we also need to maximize the economic benefits thereof. For example, we need to deliberately find market for Ugandan cargo at the destinations where Uganda Airlines flies. Our airlines go different directions, but they don't carry cargo because we have not negotiated with the different countries that we bring cargo. The standards is an issue. The committee raised concern about foreigners operating Uganda Airlines. That was answered. The committee was concerned that there is paralysis on road projects that were being worked on by UNRWA and called upon government to expedite the process of settling the sector once and for all. That means we need to discuss the RAPEX for UNRWA as well. On agriculture, industry and fisheries, the committee called for the establishment of a clear seed strategy for Uganda. We have not come out clearly. Who is in charge of certification of seed, whether it's coffee, whether it is maize, whether it is beans for the country now? Now that our operational registration is not there, coffee has been submitted, cotton. What is the strategy for the seed strategy of the country? The committee also noted that all the areas of the country should be encouraged to grow perennial crops because they are better at creating wealth than the short-term crops. The committee was concerned of the fact that there is an increase in fish catches but a decline in fish exports. Government should look into this matter. The committee was concerned there are many unqualified people posing as extension workers. It's a big problem. The committee noted inconsistencies between the certificate of financial implication on the rationalization of entities and the budgets under consideration. Mr. Speaker, what is said under RAPEX as savings, in looking at the RAPEX, I think this matter will come in detail in the RAPEX paper. We have problems there. Committee on Defense and Internal Affairs. The committee was concerned that the Army was asking for funds to monitor elections, yet it's a mandate of Uganda Police. The committee recommends that the funds, they should harmonize, this situation should be harmonized. The committee was also concerned that Ministry of Internal Affairs is still asking for funds to print passport booklets abroad, yet there has been a promise to construct and print passports under NEC and in Uganda. The committee was also concerned that Muzima increases production but continues to make losses. The committee was also concerned that our own UPDF engineering brigade is charging very high commercial rates for its infrastructure. Is it there where we can work as brothers and sisters and charge the normal rate? The committee observed that Uganda Air Cargo has collapsed, seemingly, and should transfer its assets to Uganda Airlines. On the environment, I'm about to come to the home of this. On the environment and natural resources, the committee observed that Uganda is rich in iron, yet the steel manufacturers do not use the primary raw material. The committee noted the defunct Rural Electrification Agency has left certain programs unfulfilled. You know, REA, which is the 1% levy from UCC, used to get its money and support the rural areas, even in electricity and also in providing ICT services to other countries, to our schools and communities. But Ministry of Finance has not delivered that money to those people of UCC. And there is even some infrastructure which was left in some of the schools, either by UCC and also by REA. So they face a similar change of the 1% levy. So government should look into that. The committee was concerned that water for production is budgeted in the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries, and it's also budgeted in the Ministry of Water and Environment. The question is, at what point will government wake up to harmonize this situation? The implications, yes, it's clearly same words in the Ministry of Agriculture, same words in the Ministry of Water, billions there. But government seems to be paralyzed. When will government wake up to streamline this? The committee observed that National Environment Management Authority is underfunded and understaffed, yet it's a sector that cannot be ignored. It's a key in the well-being of Ugandans, and some resources should be given to NEMA. The committee observed that the government's effort to generate electricity does not match investments in transmission, so adequate resources should be put along the value chain of generation, distribution, in that order. Committee on Health. I must say, Mr. Speaker, the people in the committee of good reports. I think, Mr. Speaker, people should read that report on its own. Well analyzed, and the committee had a lot of proposals which I think will help this country. Number one, they suggested that, among other things in that report, that we must complete Center 4 and Health Center 3. We put money under UG. They are there around the country, they need to be completed, they need equipment, and they need staff. So let's do one thing at a time before we go to the next step. Number two, recruit health workers. The level of staffing for health workers across the country is worrying. We need to look at it, especially at the lower level, at Health Center 3 and Health Center 4. Number four, the full procurement of medicine and medical supplies. Because and I'm sure it was a reassuring when the Minister of Finance, Henry, came to our committee. There was a budget cut of 100 billion for national medical staff, but he says he has put back the money. And we are happy to hear from Henry that he has put back the money for national medical stars, the 100 billion, which we saw in the budget framework, but it was not there. The committee also was concerned that last financial year, government and the Ministry of Health bought ambulances for certain constituencies and distributed them and dispatched them to the same. But in this current budget, there is no proposal to buy the balance of ambulances. Why? So there is a question there. And the recommendation is that government should provide that resource to buy the ambulances for the remaining constituencies. 3, the committee was concerned about the increase in the number of the drug expiries at the national medical stores as reported by the Auditor General. The committee was informed that a number of expiries arose from the frequent changes of the HIV ARVs regimens. So government should look into that, because they need money now. They need a lot of money to just destroy expired drugs instead of using it to buy new drugs. The committee was also concerned that the Auditor General found that only 15 out of the 27 beds in the ICU unit of Blago are fully functional. The committee was also concerned about the absenteeism of staff in health center force across the country. The average is very low. The committee noted that the different health service providing entities are requesting for training funds. The committee recommends that the training function should be centralized to the Ministry of Health to ensure proper coordination. There was also concern from colleagues from Bukedi that why is there a region without a regional hospital, the only region in the country without a regional hospital, and they needed that Tororo be upgraded to a regional referral hospital. Number 8, the committee was also concerned that funds for the maintenance of existing ambulances was not provided in the budget, and there was a budget to that effect. The committee noted that Uganda is faced with an increase in mental health problems among the population. The committee was informed that the regional referral hospital, the National Regional Hospital, is lacking in terms of mental health. The regional referral hospitals are lacking in terms of mental health units, but there's also a shortage of staffing. The committee was concerned about the irresponsible reporting of disease outbreaks in a manner that scares away tourists. our media and our people always, there is this scare tactics of reporting responsibly, and as if the mpox has covered the whole country, and that scares away tourists from our country. The committee was also concerned about the congestion at the Uganda Cancer Institute and the need to address that. Colleagues and all members, those are the highlights of the budget framework paper. They did for financial year 2025-26 be approved by Parliament with amendments as per the committee recommendations detailed in Annex 1, Annex 2, and Annex 3. I beg to report.